What's going on, guys, and welcome back to WWE Network and Chill, where every single Monday I, Graham, Gius, and Matthews break down all the original programming that I watch on the WWE Network. Today I'm giving my 2 cents on the Bruno documentary that aired honoring the life and career of Bruno Sammartino after Raw last week on the WWE Network. I'm not sure where the clips were taken from. I had thought that maybe they had released a documentary on Bruno a couple of years ago. And it looked like some of the interviews that they used with Bruno, they were from like 2014, 2015. So I'm thinking maybe they released a DVD documentary on him a couple years ago. I couldn't recall one, so I looked it up and I couldn't find any. So they must have just taken the clips of interviews they had with him for whatever reason and put them into this documentary. I don't think most of the interviews are new. I think they're just rerun material. But again, I've never seen most of these interviews before. And even the footage of Bruno coming back for the Hall of Fame 5 years ago in 2013, all of that footage was stuff I had never seen before. It was really, really cool. So it's kind of like the Warrior documentary from a couple years ago, where the basis of the doc is Warrior coming back for the Hall of Fame. So they kind of talk about his career and his life and the falling out that Bruno had with the company many years ago. And they keep on cutting back to, Bruno and Triple H, Bruno and Vince, Bruno at the Hall of Fame 5 years ago. So it was pretty cool. But I will give my play-by-play thoughts on the documentary here in this review. So the first thing we see on this documentary, and the runtime, by the way, is about an hour. So the first thing we see is Bruno and Triple H meeting up at the Hall of Fame. They arrive at the arena at the same time, and Bruno admits that he kind of thanks Triple H that he was the one who put the whole deal together. And Triple H kind of elaborates on that a little later on towards the end of the documentary. But it was Triple H, so for much as you might hate the guy for being responsible for the Reign of Terror on Raw many, many years ago and all this other stuff, and for burying this guy and that guy, he has single-handedly brought back Bruno Sammartino, the Warrior, made amends with the Savage family, the Poffo family, and really many, many others that if it wasn't for Triple H, I don't think we would see a lot of these people back in the company. But it was cool they kind of kicked off the documentary with that footage. Then they talk about having Bruno having sold out Madison Square Garden 187 times. And then we go all the way back to his childhood, where he grew up, where he lived in 1933. I think he was born in 35, but around that time, Italy fell under Nazi control in World War II. Then they fled from their home to a mountain where they lived for a while. His father was working in America to make the family money, and he said, "I never remembered a day where we weren't hungry." That's how little they were on food. That's how how low they were on food for such a long time. And it was not only him. I think he had a few siblings, obviously his mother. And then ultimately, German soldiers found their hideout in the mountain, which is pretty fucking crazy. His mother promised him and the other children that they would have a happily ever after, pretty much saying that they could be on the verge of death, and that at least if we die, we'll be in a happier place. We won't be hungry anymore. We won't be tired anymore. Blah blah blah, which is pretty crazy. Like, he was pretty close to dying, and eventually when he was found, he became deathly sick, because like a lot of the people in, like, the concentration camps, not that Bruno was a part of them, but like a lot of those people, because their bodies are so used to not having food for so long, they get really, really sick. Not to say they weren't sick to begin with, physically sick to begin with, but when they eventually return to, like, a normal diet, a lot of those people died after surviving those concentration camps because they could not live on a regular diet after being suppressed with food for so long. After going so long without food, a lot of them did not make it. But Bruno did. He lived. Journeyed to America 3 days later, he said. Started wrestling. He started bulking up. Got motivated. Got to 275 pounds by 1958. So by the time he was 23 years old, he was 275 pounds. Looking like like he was chiseled out of stone, was Bruno Sammartino. So to start out his wrestling career, he started wrestling in smaller high schools before going to Toronto, and that was really where his ascent to the top started. Selling out arenas here and selling arenas there. And in the meantime, Vincent J. McMahon broke away from the NWA, formed the WWF, and created the WWF Championship, and crowned Buddy Rogers as the inaugural champion. But it was obvious that he was on his way out. He didn't have much longer, and they had to kind of pass the torch to the next guy. And when they brought in Bruno to be that next guy, Bruno even admitted that he and Buddy Rogers did not get along. They did not get along initially. Bruno forced him to tap out. The referee called for the bell, and that was when he won his first WWE Championship in 1963. I believe at MSG, at Madison Square Garden. And they also even said Buddy Rogers, the reason they didn't get along was because Buddy saw Bruno as a threat, as he probably should have, because it was, like, this guy's taking my spot. Will he treat the business with the same respect that I did, treat this championship with the same respect that I did? Buddy Rogers was not champion for very, very long before Bruno took the belt, maybe for only a few weeks, because I know the championship was created almost exactly 55 years ago this month. And then Bruno would go on to win the championship, I think on May 17th, if I'm not mistaken, the very next month at MSG. So anyway, we cut back to Bruno and Triple H at the Hall of Fame ceremony, and Triple H gifts Bruno with the very same belt that he won in that very same building 50 years earlier, which is really, really cool. So anyway, they talk about Bruno being beloved in MSG. Vince says that Bruno epitomized the American dream, which is why he was so beloved by the audience, not only in MSG, but really across the world. Paul Heyman said that Bruno had an enormous impact on the culture, especially in the Northeast. And I cannot tell you how many people that I know that are not wrestling fans, especially not currently, but they were maybe not even like full-fledged fans like we are back in the day, but they knew of Bruno Sammartino. And I live in Connecticut, so it's pretty obvious that a lot of the people that, especially like older people like my dad and my grandparents and a few other people around that age range knew of Bruno Sammartino, and he had such a huge impact on the culture. I think that's putting it lightly. Anyway, so he had been champion for 8 years. And Vince even admitted it. It took him a while. It took him a few years to build a following, but in being champion for so long and being champion for 8 years that first time around, obviously started to wear on Bruno. And been being champion for 8 years. I mean, it wasn't like he was defending the belt every single day, but still, being champion and being the guy for so long without ever really getting a break is going to make your body break down. And that's exactly what was happening to Bruno Sammartino. So he told Vince that, dude, I'm hurting bad here. I got a rough schedule. I got to take a break. So it's not even like Vince took the title off of Bruno. He would have kept Bruno as champion for as long as he probably would have fucking lived. Bruno would still be champion today, very likely, had he not passed a week ago or 2 weeks ago. But he would very likely be still champion in up to his 80s. Like, I'm not, like, realistically speaking here. If it was up to Vince McMahon, because he saw Bruno as such a huge draw. But, that being said, Vince realized, okay, you're hurting bad. The schedule's a little rough. We got to take the title off of you. But it was only because of Bruno that he approached Vince that he had to get the championship taken off of him. It wasn't even like they took the belt off of him by a decision. It was all Bruno's decision to change the championship. So, like a complete opposite of like a Hulk Hogan. But anyway, so Ivan Koloff was chosen by Bruno to be his successor, took the title from him in 1971. And they told a great story here, an interview with both Bruno and Ivan Koloff, not in the same room, but they were both talking about it in separate interviews. Bruno thought that Koloff hurt his ears. When he came off the top rope for the finish of the match, that he thought that when he landed knee first onto his head, the side of his head, his ears, whatever, he thought that he hurt his ears because he could hear a pin drop in that arena when the bell sounded. And he thought, okay, maybe I can't hear, and Ivan Koloff hurt me. But then Arnold Skolin comes over and says, are you okay? So he's like, okay, I can hear Arnold okay. Then why is there no crowd reaction? And it's because the crowd was so shocked that Ivan Koloff won the championship. And Koloff was stunned too. It was crazy. So a great story there from both Ivan and Bruno. I think Ivan actually passed away about a year ago too. And I don't think he's in the Hall of Fame, which is kind of crazy, but he should be, nonetheless. After that, Bruno went back home to his family. He took about 2 to 3 months off, he said. Cherished that time with his family, thought life could not be better. In the meantime, Pedro Morales became champion, was not doing as well as Bruno. He was still packing up MSG. MSG was still doing really, really well with Pedro as champion. But the other arenas, admittedly, were not doing as well as when Bruno was on top. So, Sean Stasiak beat Morales for the belt in 1973, and then Sammartino beat Stasiak for the belt a short time after, and becoming a champion as well. I think Stasiak was actually recently inducted in the Hall of Fame as part of the legacy honorees into the WWE Hall of Fame, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, so this time around, in his second stint as WWE champion, he had a much reduced schedule, which he was enjoying. He thought, he would only be around for a year, but then 1 year turned to 2 years, and 2 years turned to 3 years. So then anyway, he was in a match with Stan Hansen. And then in that match, Stan Hansen accidentally broke Bruno's neck. He was power slamming him. He had him up in the air and then kind of flipped him into a front forward slam. And it wasn't as apparent that he broke his neck, but you can kind of see that Bruno landed slightly awkwardly, head first. And it wasn't Stan's fault. I mean, shit happens. Accidents happen. And then Stan got some heat with Vince, like, you broke Bruno's neck. And Stan's like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, blah, blah, blah. But it did build to a great payoff when they faced off in Shea Stadium. I think it was Shea Stadium. I know they also talked about them selling out Shea. That's a tongue twister. Selling out Shea with Larry Zbyszko, his former mentor, the living legend Larry Zbyszko. So I know that was when he kind of came back a few years later. But anyway, even with a broken neck, he continued to deliver. In his career, he was coming to a close. He kind of realized that he was beaten by Billy Graham for the championship in 1977. So he held the championship for another 4 years, on top of the original 8 years as champion for his first run, which is fucking insane, like I said. So anyway, San Martino went on to wrestle Stan Hansen and Shea, Larry Zbyszko in Shea Stadium, sold out the place at the gate with 5,000 tickets sold in 1980. And then he started to notice changes that he wasn't liking. Didn't particularly care for how the business was changing to the muscled up guys and the more entertainment aspect of the business. So he officially left WWE in 1988. And for a long time, there was a rift between Bruno and Vince McMahon, until Triple H reached out to Bruno back in 2012, 2013. And Triple H said, hey, we would love for you to come back into the Hall of Fame. And Bruno said, I appreciate that, but no thank you. And then Triple H asked him, have you watched our product lately? And Bruno said, no, I haven't. So he inclined him to check it out, see how he would like it. And he really, really enjoyed it. Bruno checked out the product. He saw that it was a much different product than it used to be with the PG rating and not as much vulgar language and all this other shit. So he was happy to be inducted. So he came back, and he was welcomed back by Vince. We see this great footage of Vince and Bruno reconciling, which is awesome. And Triple H goes on to say that without Bruno, there is no Hall of Fame, there is no WWE, which I completely agree with. And then Vince also says, you can't have a legitimate Hall of Fame without Bruno in it. So, which I've said for a long time, I had said dating back to 2012, 2013, that, again, my top three to make the Hall of Fame legit were Bruno Sammartino, The Ultimate Warrior, and Randy Savage. And we got all three of those guys within 3 years. We got Bruno in 2013, we got The Warrior in 2014, and we got Savage in 2015. And it's sad now all three guys are gone. Bruno recently passed away, Warrior passed away literally days removed from the induction, and then Savage died even before the induction took place. He died back in 2011. So still, it's great to have all those guys in the Hall of Fame. And I think it was rumored around the summer of 2012 that Bruno might be going into the Hall of Fame, and then he declined it, and then he accepted around late February of 2013, which was huge. And even, it was so great to have Bruno back in the company, if only for a few years, just to kind of remind people of the impact that he had on the business. Now, I don't think he ever appeared on Raw. I know he was in a dark segment where they wished him a happy birthday back in maybe 2013, 2014, in his native Philly, on his birthday, which was cool. But other than that, I don't think Bruno ever appeared on Raw, if I'm not mistaken. He did make a few appearances at WrestleMania, in the crowd and stuff. And he was older, so there wasn't a ton you could do with him. He wasn't going to become the general manager or anything, but they did do a lot of stuff in recent years with Bruno, which made me really, really happy. He was on Legends with JBL, which I might have reviewed, if I'm not mistaken. I think I reviewed that show. I might have to go back and check here on WWE Network and chill. But yeah, he had a Legends interview with JBL, Legends with JBL interview back in late 2016. He was on Table for Three with, I think, Randy Orton and Ric Flair. A really odd assortment of talent, but I'm pretty sure that was the Table for Three, and it was great to see him on there as well. But yeah, it was great to see Bruno back in the good graces of WWE before passing just recently, and he left a tremendous impact on the company and the business as a whole. Like I said, my father was a big Bruno fan, even though he was never really a full-fledged wrestling fan. Always wanted to meet Bruno. I think he came close to coming here in late 2014 to the New York area for a Northeast wrestling appearance. I don't even think he ended up appearing at that event, if I'm not mistaken. So it's not like he really missed out. With Warrior, he did an NEW appearance in early 2013 that I wanted to make, or 2012, I think, that I really, really, really wanted to make, but couldn't, and I regret it now since he has passed on. With Bruno, I would have loved to have met him, if only because he meant so much to my dad, but unfortunately we'll never get that chance. But again, the fact that he lived to 82, the guy was in tremendous shape even up until his last day, which is amazing to me. It was really great to see Bruno back in WWE, if only for the final few years of his life. But anyway, guys, going back to the documentary here for a second. It was awesome. That's what this episode was all about anyway, right? Yeah, the Bruno documentary was fantastic. Well worth checking out, a little under an hour. Learned a lot of new stuff about Bruno that I've never known before. A lot of this stuff was probably already public knowledge. I've never really done my research on Bruno, and a lot of this stuff we already talked about in Legends with JBL, but it's well worth checking out. Bruno is an amazing storyteller, and hearing the interviews with Vince, Hulk Hogan, which was from a while ago, obviously, Triple H, seeing the footage of Bruno coming back in 2013 was awesome. Really almost brought a tear to my eye, just seeing him back and seeing how happy he was to be on good terms again with both Triple H, more specifically Vince McMahon, and the WWE. Anyway, folks, thank you for checking out my full review of the Bruno documentary on the WWE Network. Like I said, well worth checking out. The hour just flies by with all the stellar stories that are told by Bruno himself and many others. Really, really enjoyed it. But be sure to like the video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more daily content. We will be back next Monday with another all-new installment in my WWE Network and Chill series. Until then, have a great rest of your week. I'm Graham G.S. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.